Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. In today's video, I want to do a refresher for Outlaw Rogue PvP guide for the patch 8.1. Outlaw Rogues didn't really get too many new changes, but I just wanted to make a refresher guide for everybody trying to get in patch 8.1 with all the things that I learned from the previous patch. I'm going to be giving you guys all the best stats that you would want to run, some of the trinkets I would recommend, some of the talents that you could run, as well as Azerite choices that you can use depending on what kind of build you want. Anyway, let's just get into the video. So the first part of the video I do want to talk a bit about is the talents. That's like the really exciting stuff that you can mess with. You got your honor talents as well as your normal talents. But this is my PvE talents, but they are going to change slightly for PvP. And the first world quick draw just ends up being the strongest option out of the three. There's really no point of picking anything else. At level 30, Acrobatics is what I like. It's kind of fun to just be able to stay out of the reach of a melee enemy, or if a mage, let's say, roots you from a distance, you could just kind of hit him from far away, because this would be more or less the melee range, but you have that a little bit extra room. And it's fun in battlegrounds, let's say, to kite a warrior or a death knight around where they can barely reach you out of reach, so it's fun to just dead zone players. Retractable hook is not that bad either. It gives you a lot more mobility just to be able to kind of flip over to the other side of the arena match or battleground. Very useful. Hit and run is also pretty good if you want to like run flags in battlegrounds. I actually tried this in an RBG the other day, and it was actually quite effective. You can get around places very quickly. What I don't like about hit and run is any kind of slows that do like a 50% slow. I mean, that 15% movement speed, you're not going to feel it. So a slow is basically going to counter a lot of it, which is why I usually don't play hit and run. I'd say if you're not sure, Acrobatics strikes is a safer option. Level 45, I think it's choice between Mark for Death, which gives you common points that you can mess with, use them for buffs, use them for damage, use them for stuns, or Deeper Strat. I prefer Deeper Strat mostly because Outlaw doesn't have full 6 common point stun with any of the other two because of Between the Eyes. Between the Eyes, it consumes common points just like a kidney, but it's ranged, so it has a 20-yard range and has damage. If it crits, it does 4 times the damage, so it can basically do slightly more damage than a dispatch at 5 common points. But also the duration of the stun is going to be -1 compared to the other specs. While let's say Assassin and Subtlety have a 6-second stun for 5 common points, you have a 5-second stun. So I like to go for Deeper Strat so I can get full 6-second stun. And for Outlaw, the way the playstyle is, I'm just trying to make sure that I have full energy, full 6 seconds, then stun the enemy, and then with that full energy I can get a lot of value out of my damage. Plus, if you can enroll yourself a really good buff combo at 6 common points, it'll be very effective. I like Deeper Stratagem for the most part. Level 60, you have Iron Stomach, which is pretty great for duels or solo PvP stuff like in battlegrounds. Cheat Death can be useful against certain combos that are all about blowing you up, so you're trying to basically survive them. I think Elusiveness in the long term will be the strongest option, but for Outlaw, Iron Stomach is actually a very strong choice. Especially if you combo it together with something like Drink Up Me Hearties, you can get yourself 2 very powerful heals that will heal for a lot of your health. Maybe you can get both of them used at the same time in order to basically bring your health all the way almost back up to maximum. I mean, it's a huge heal, and I think it's worth considering. If you're not sure, Elusiveness is going to be your staple option, but if you want to mess around with Iron Stomach, for example, with like a heal heavy build for solo PvP, that can be a lot of fun. Definitely awesome for battlegrounds. Otherwise, you can just stay Elusiveness. Level 75, you actually have a pretty cool option of Prey on the Weak, which you get to use now with you Between the Eyes. It's pretty neat, but it only does 5% damage increase in PvP. So this one, honestly, you can kind of forego. What I like to run also is Blinding Powder if I'm doing, let's say, arenas. It reduces the cooldown of your blind by 30 seconds, increases range by 15. The range itself, the increase, doesn't really matter that much. I mean, you can basically blind an enemy from, well,
too far away.
Too far away. You can blind them from this far away. Which is a little bit silly, as you can see, because I'm a little bit far from the train dummies. You can see there's a bit of a distance, so you can blind them all the way from Africa, which is hilarious. But it lets you set up your kills maybe a little bit easier. It lets you blind the enemy a little bit easier. It allows you to change your positions up a little bit in arenas. Very useful, and reduces the cooldown of it by 30 seconds. This is actually insane, and that's what I think is going to make Outlaw a little bit stronger than the other specs, especially in the CC department, as long as you can utilize it properly. Then you have at level 90L, Alacrity is really the best option. You can go loaded dice, but it's really going to be tied to Adrenaline Rush, so hopefully you get really good set of buffs out of that one. Slice and Dice is not that strong. You can run if you want to. It doesn't matter that much in PvP. Although you will lose on the other buffs, like the energy regen buff is nice, the extra common points is nice, critical strike is nice, you'll lose out on a lot of good buffs that you can use, but it'll be less randomization overall in your life. So you could play Assassination just for the sake of no randomization. I think still Roll the Bones buffs that it offers is going to be the most game-changing and most valuable for you. It's especially powerful once you learn how to play with it. A lot of people simply don't actually know how to properly use it, which buffs to roll, which buffs to re-roll out of. I think Alacrity is going to be the best one in that row. I think it's going to be more value for you guys just to learn and bite the bullet, just learn what the buffs do, learn which ones to re-roll, and learn to play that playstyle. Level 100, I think Killing Spree is the best for PvP. It offers the most amount of burst damage on demand. Blade Rush is okay. I feel like it just doesn't have nearly enough impact in arenas where it's all about, with rogues, it's all about getting the big setup and the big burst. Killing Spree does the big burst when you need it. Blade Rush simply doesn't do that. The only difference is Killing Spree can be interrupted. So in Battlegrounds, I sometimes don't like running Killing Spree because anybody and everybody, like a smallest fear or a stun by a pet or a gouge, which there's not a lot out of those in the game, the smallest CC can just stop your Killing Spree. So I don't like it, and it sucks when it kind of gets stopped. It's better to be used in RBGs where you can actually get some kind of a setup combo. In random battlegrounds though, I like Blade Rush. I think it does a fair amount of damage. I like the charge mechanic to it, and you get to use it quite often. I don't really think it makes that much of a difference, but if I want like a 100% guaranteed kill option, I'd probably go with Killing Spree. In the talents, since I'm not a orc or a human, I'm gonna go with Gladiator's Medallion. That's a pretty safe option. If you're playing human, you can play Relentless. Apparently that's been in the meta. Controller's King is going to be the talent you'll always set and forget it. When the enemy is CC'd by stun, silence, or polymorph, which happens pretty often, and you will also walks off your stuns as well, you'll get 3 seconds of Adrenaline Rush. And that can be chained in Battlegrounds pretty often. That can be easily chained in arenas if you're playing with a mage or something, or Shadow Priest, for example. There's a lot of classes where this works with. So Controller's King is just definitely king. Smoke Bomb is one I like in arenas, and I also like Thick as Thieves in arenas and Battlegrounds, as long as someone's nearby. If you're playing for a more solo experience, I think Drake and Hardys would be a lot better than Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb can be used in single target, but you don't get that much value out of it. Also, I like Dismantle. You can even drop Thick as Thieves since you won't be able to get value out of it, and grab Dismantle, so now you can deal with melee, for example. I used to like Plunder Armor, but ever since they put that on GCD, I'm not a huge fan of. I feel like there's too many abilities on GCD already. Not a fan. If you want for a more faster playstyle, Take a Cut is really nice. After you roll the bones, you gain 50% haste. As a BFA, this is actually huge, and the amount of energy regen that it will give you is nuts. So being able to re-roll combo points at low, no matter what buff you get, you still get value out of Take Your Cut. So I remember using this one for the longest time. If you have an energy regen issues, you should be running Take a Cut. But that's some of the options that you guys can run for your talents. Alright, now let's move on to some of the stats in the game. What stats would you want to run for your rogue? I say it's very similar to PvE. You want at least about 1,000 points of haste, and then from there what I like to do is stack a little bit of versatility and equal amounts of crit. Mastery doesn't really do much for you. What I really like about Critical Strike though is you have a lot of synergies with your crit based abilities. Between the Eyes, if that crits, that can do a lot of damage. Pistol shots with certain Azure traits, if you can get those to crit, that can be a lot of damage. Your dispatches, that can be a lot of damage, even Sinister Strikes. Because of the way that Outlaw is, Roll the Bones is still part of your playstyle, but they buff the damage of Sinister Strikes, auto attacks, pistol shots, dispatches. Like all your other abilities simply just do damage. So it's pretty great if they crit, because you'll be able to get more consistently a lot more value. I have my crit to 25%, and if I roll myself the shark buff, that means I have a half a chance to crit. 50% chance 1 in 2 abilities are going to crit. That's so much value on my damage. We know that crit is not as strong in PvP as in PvE. Like in PvE, in raiding and dungeons, it is like 200% damage. In PvP, it's like 150%. So it's not nearly as big of value, but when everything crits, you simply are doing more damage by up to like 50% or so. Some of my pieces of gear that I'm running for Azure traits are, I think the best one right now would be Deadshot. One of the best ones right now in the game for Outlaw is Deadshot. You can literally triple stack it if you have the capability to. Another really good one is Ace Up Your Sleeve, since you're stunning enemies a lot anyway. This one also has a nifty effect where it has a 2% chance per combo point spent to grant 4 combo points. And this one is, you have to develop a reaction time for it, because sometimes you'll use Between the Eyes, you'll get full bar of combo points, and sometimes you want to, let's say, stun, then you use a pistol shot proc, but then you have all these combo points, and if you forget about that, or not careful, and you just pistol shot, you're overdrawn combo points, you're losing out the value in your damage, where you could have just hit, let's say, dispatch into into pistol shot, and then you get a lot more value out of the damage, and you're able to get your rotation and burst going. The effect with this one is kind of cool, kind of nice. Because we run deeper strategy, we'll get a lot more value out of between the eyes. If you're gonna stack any traits, I would say stacking Deadshot would be the easiest, just because it's really hard to mess it up. While with the Ace Up Your Sleeve, unless you're able to get the value with the common points, if that ever happens, then you're basically losing out on some value. Another trait that I like is Archive of the Titans. This one seems to stack up fairly quickly in PvP. This one is kind of... This one you'll get it whether you raid or not. If you don't really raid, you don't really need it. But you have two of the best traits. You have Deadshot, you have a Ace Up Your Sleeve, and you can spice up your gameplay. You can either be boring, just get old triple Deadshot, be boring, get triple Ace Up Your Sleeve. Those will give you the most amount of value. Or you can have one of each and a third trait that you like. Maybe one that has a slow effect or a bleed. Let's say you're playing against rogues and you want dagger on the back, for example, so you can put a bleed on rogues in case they're stealthing you. You can do that too. Just about anything and everything works for Outlaw. That's part of the fun of what the spec is like. Some of the other things I can recommend about the spec when it comes to gearing, only one thing I can say is maybe try to go for a Darkmoon Deck Fathoms. This one is exceptionally strong for Outlaw because of the way that the spec is. The spec is very heavy about sustained damage, even cleave damage if you can get it to work. But the sustained damage of the spec is very, very high. So Darkmoon Fathoms ends up proccing a lot and ends up adding to a lot of your damage right now. Yeah, this one is bought on the auction house, and the price varies from server to server. On mine, it was about 30k or so. At the beginning of the expansion, it was close to 100k, but the value of it, even at 100k, was definitely worth. The amount of damage that it puts out is pretty crazy for a trinket, and it's just extra passive damage with an effect. It's a single target trinket, so it'll just work on an enemy that you're targeting, rather than, let's say, if you have cleave, it won't be just like, you know, cleaving all a bunch of enemies with fathoms. It'll just start dropping anchors on the heads, and it has a very, just overall, this trinket does so much damage that it's worth getting, and I feel like you're losing out damage not having it. Although if you do want some of the other trinkets, I think anything like the PvP trinket like Dread Gladiator's Medallion is pretty good. I have a Golden Plume from Mythic Pluses, which is exactly the same trinket. It's just a stronger versatility effect and more agility, so that's what I've been running sometimes. I think Deadeye Spyglass can be pretty good if you're all about tunneling bosses. Harlan's Dice is also pretty good if you can get that from Mythic Pluses. I think the Forest Lord's Razor Leaf is not terrible either because of how crit heavy you are, so you get a more crit chance and more crit value to your abilities from the new rare, for example, is kind of cool. Past that, I don't really think there's any other trinkets that you would want to run. Any PvP trinkets are fine, proc trinkets are fine, unused trinkets are fine too, or you can mix any kind of Mythic Pluses trinkets if you wish. Alright, let's talk about some of the macros you will need for Outlaw for PvP. These are the most useful macros that I come up with, and you can make any variations of those. One of the most important things you can do with a rogue in general, not even just an Outlaw thing, is keep set focus on an enemy. So let's say you have X, which is the main DPS, but then the Moon is, let's say, the Druid healer. You'll be DPS in X, but you'll want to do CC on the Moon, so you'll be able to run up. And notice how I was able to CC him without taking my targeting off of X. This is what you'll need at the very least is focus macros. This is what focus macros look like. Use bracket at focus bracket gouge. I'll have these macros down somewhere in the description, but for the most part you should be able to copy them. It's / use space bracket at focus close bracket space spell name. And what you could do is just copy this and add whatever spell name you want. Here, make sure there's a space after this bracket spell name. That's all. So I have one for gouge, I have one for blind, I have one for between the eyes, since you can use all these abilities for CC. So having these 3 CC as Outlaw will allow you lots of crowd control. So again, we have Moon as a set focus. We have the main target here as X. So I can go from, let's say I'm popping cooldowns. Hey, I gotta roll the bones. Alright, I got a decent buff. I want to throw a CC chain on the Moon. Bam, turn, stun him. Don't even need to take my eyes off of X. Oh, the sun's about to run out. Turn on blind. Bam. And I'm still on X. I didn't move anywhere. Let's say my blind is about to run out because it's a PvP blind, not a PvE blind that's like 1 hour long. Grapple over, gouge, bam. Doing some more. Hey, stun is back up. I can chain CC somebody by myself, not even leaving the main DPS target. That's one of the advantages of Outlaw Rogue. It's super fun about that. Another macro that I found extremely useful, and I actually have to spend some common points to show you to you guys, is a grapple hook macro. Grapple hook is one of the best tools for Outlaw Rogue. It's one of the coolest mobility abilities in the game. Think of kind of like a, think of an ability very similar to Heroic Leap. That's basically what this is. It's basically a rogue's Heroic Leap. You'll throw out a grappling hook and it's 40-yard range, so you can go pretty far. What most people end up doing with grappling hook, however, and they'll keep using, all of you guys keep using the ability in wrong ways. A lot of you guys still use the original cursor system. So you know how when you hit distract or something, you get this green reticle, and then you can choose where you want to aim, right? Say zoom out a little bit, turn this off for a second, zoom out, and you can choose like, alright, you have, let's say, key press, and then you have to do the click. Key press, and then you have to do the click. That can be a little bit obnoxious in PvP, because I feel like you lose out a lot of like that timing for it. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of seconds lost every time you have to do that, because then you have to press it, then you have to left click, then there's the aiming aspect. Lots of people like to do is grab a hook, and then they have to aim where to go, or just try to press it and left click at the same time, and you get a little bit confused in terms of your accuracy. What I like to do is make a cursor macro. So what this macro will do is it will execute the ability, it will bypass the green reticle, and it will simply just aim wherever your cursor is at. So if my mouse is like over here, I hit it, bam, it'll just do it in a single second. This has saved me so many times when, let's say, you're in Eye of the Storm and you get knocked away by a shaman or a druid and you're flying to your death and you're just trying to get back to land. All I'm trying to do is spam on anywhere that's ground based and trying to just spam grappling hook. And every time that I didn't have this macro, every time I would fail. Every time I wouldn't be able to be fast enough. But with this macro, my reaction time is a lot better. You can react to situations a lot easier as an Outlaw Rogue with this type of macro. And I'm going to try to get it back up. And you can do little things again, like I'm attacking X, for example. The moon is over there. And the moon is, let's say, casting heals at X. Or something, rather. Alright, I'm going to go, let's say, with just a grapple hook into a gouge. From there I can maybe follow up CC from there on, and as a rogue you'll be able to get a lot of value out of it. You can use it for mobility, you can use it to chase after people, you can use it to get away from people, and if you want to use retractable hook so you can get a much shorter cooldown on your grappling, you can. I don't think it's necessary as of BFA. I remember in Legion we basically had a talent that let us grapple hook, but now the grapple hook is baseline. I feel like having a 1 minute cooldown is nice because you're not really going to get a full 1 minute cooldown. Part of what playing Outlaw Rogue is the cooldown reduction on a lot of your abilities. Every time you spend combo points into a finisher, you shave off certain few seconds off a certain ability. So it says 1 minute cooldown, but it's really more about like 30 to 40 seconds or so. Very useful ability, and having that macro is helpful as well. Some of the other macros that I have will be the sap macro. Show tooltip, sap, clear target, target enemy, cast sap. This one is what I use when I'm trying to find other rogues in stealth. You simply just sap it, and what it'll do is you can see in my targeting. It'll just try to rotate anybody nearby and try to target any enemy near. So when you have no enemies around you, like, you know, let's say it's just, oh, it's a rogue only duel, it'll just let you kind of look for people and spam it. So as soon as you target somebody, you'll be able to sap them instantly. Let's talk a bit about the general playstyle of an Outlaw Rogue. That didn't change at all. But so first of all, there's no real opener for Outlaw Rogue. A lot of people try to construct some kind of a by-the-book, step-by-step opener that they need to follow with Rogue every single time. Outlaw Rogue is a far more free-flowing of a spec. You don't need to have some kind of a direct like chain of abilities that you have to execute every single time just to play it. You're not subtlety, you're not assassination, you don't really have all of these prerequisites. You can just kind of open up. All you're trying to do is build combo points, then roll the bones until you get a fair amount of buffs. Or you keep rolling the bones until you have a setup. You just need to make sure that you have a buff of some sort in order to help you do damage. Most of the buffs do some sort of a DPS increase in some way or another. Like Buried Treasure gives you more energy. That means you can execute more abilities during a rotation without being interrupted. Let's see, another buff right here. Skull and Crossbones. It gives you chances that your Sinister Strike will generate a free pistol shot. Let's see what else we got. We got Shark buff, which is just a crit increase, but 20%. So I already have like, what, 27, 28. My crit is actually going up because of a proc, but I have basically 50%. Now I definitely have 50% crit with the Ruthless Precision. Half of my abilities are critting, I can do a lot of damage. Let's see, there's another buff here. Skull and Crossbones, we have Grand Melee, that's a really good one. Attack speed increased by 55%. That's a damage increase. Then we have stuff like Broadsides, which generates extra common points, and abilities to generate common points like Sinister Strikes, like Pistol Shots. All of them deal 20% more damage. That's also a damage increase as well. The only one that isn't a damage increase is True Bearing. So you basically keep rolling until you have a buff. If you want to keep rolling until you get the best buffs, you could, but it's not advised. As a rogue, you have a simple playstyle. Every time you have a setup, that means usually when you have a stun, you want to build common points. You want to communicate with your team for arenas that, hey, I'm gonna stun the enemy, build common points, wait until you're full of energy, stun the enemy, try to do as much damage as you can. That's all you do. So while you're waiting for your setup, while you're waiting for your stun, while you're communicating with the team when you're gonna stun, you could just spend the time re-rolling buffs until you get something decent. Sometimes you'll get something good, sometimes you won't get anything amazing. But for the general part, Outlaw setup in BFA, the way that it's set up right now, you always do damage no matter what buff you get, as long as it's not just True Bearing. True Bearing is the only one that does nothing for you. Has a cool effect of cooldown reduction, but because of the way that Outlaw Rogue is, for us energy regen is more of an issue. For us, common point building is a lot harder than it was, let's say, in Legion. So back in Legion, being able to build common points while doing no damage meant True Bearing, might as well get it because we can cycle through our cooldowns better. Now that we don't generate nearly as many resources in BFA, but we do far more damage, it's better just to go for damage increasers rather than going for the cooldown reduction overall. So again, just say in the opener, I guess you can open up on an enemy with a cheap shot if you want to. Let's say, hey, how's it going? What's up? I'm a rogue. Build common points, reroll. What buff do I have? Hey, decent, Grand Melee. So I'm gonna tell my teammate, hey, we're gonna get cross CC. We're gonna CC Moon. I'm gonna go damage on Train Dummy. Actually, I'm just gonna cycle through common points since I just stunned them, so I'm gonna wait for the stun DRs. Right? We're gonna get a gouge on the Moon, stun on this guy, full common points, try to do as much damage as we can, continue CCing Moon, and that's really about it. And you basically try to do this as many times as you can until the enemy is out of cooldowns. Alrighty, some of the other abilities. Adrenaline Rush, you basically can use this in cooldown. You can use this in the opener, you can use it to your burst, you don't have to save it. Outlaw Rogue, Adrenaline Rush is a good cooldown, but it feels more of a rotational ability than anything. Because of the cooldown reduction, having this ability not on cooldown for your common points to shave off the CD of this ability is just not worth. I mean, I'm about to be at the 2-minute mark with this ability just after having it with me. Now it's at 2 minutes, as you can see. Yeah, so having these abilities not on cooldown is basically you losing a lot of the value of how Outlaw plays because of the way that you are. We talked about it before, but Restless Blades, finisher moves reduce the remaining cooldown of Adrenaline Rush, Between the Eyes, Sprint, Grappling Hook, Killing Spree, Vanish by 1 second per common point spent, which means it gives you a lot of value. This also works with some of the other abilities like Blade Rush, for example. Way back in the day, it used to work with Blind, so you can imagine how OP Outlaw Rogue would have been, or was, with a much shorter blind. It was basically like a minute cooldown on your blind, which was absolutely nuts. Gave you so many setups to go for. That's basically the spec. And that is basically Outlaw Rogue for PvP. That's really about all there is to it. You're just trying to get a decent set of buffs, trying to go for a stun setup combo with your arena partners, trying to get some cross CC, so you know, somebody would CC Moon, somebody can CC, let's say, Square, and then we burst down an X. We'll stun X, we can blind Moon, we can gouge Square if we want to, so we can be just a big CC machine. That's basically what Outlaw Rogue is. We're not that different from rogues though. Like in general, what rogues normally do. We go for setups, we get the stun on the kill target, we call for cross CC, we try to help out with cross CC whenever possible. We have decent mobility, we actually have exceptional mobility because of the way that it is. So for example, let's say Blade's Edge, you get knocked off, you can just grapple back in, while the other specs need to like shadow step to somebody, which is not that difficult, but it just gives you a whole new free range of movement, I guess is the best way to put it. And then while you have downtime of trying to get a setup, you're just trying to make sure you're rolling for a decent buff. You can roll buffs at 4, 5, 6 common points, whatever you want to do. It depends what kind of a setup you got. If like you have a setup that we need to go soon, 2 combo point reroll, build combo points, get a stun. That's all perfectly fine. You can do that as well. You can get a lot of value out of abilities when you're bursting them. Alrighty, so I think that's about everything I can show you guys when it comes to Outlaw Rogues. Just about everything that I can think of, at least for now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this guide on Outlaw Rogues. Hopefully this gives you guys a little bit of an idea of where to start and what to do with the spec if you want to play some Outlaw for PvP. It's a super fun spec. It deals incredible damage right now. I guess the last thing I can mention, this is really not unmentionable, but like say you gotta spin the flag with AoE, you simply turn on Blade Flurry and follow single target mechanics. That's all. And it's actually worth, if you're in Battlegrounds and there's enemies nearby, turning on Blade Flurry is kind of worth now, because it actually deals damage compared to Legion. Past that, that's really about everything that I need to cover. Thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And I'll see all of you guys in another video.